It was a crisp Saturday morning when I walked into the jewelry store I had visited many times before. Only this time I came alone and I didn't wear anything flashy. My heels were modest, my coat was clean but simple, and I wore no makeup, just lip balm. The moment I walked in, I greeted the staff at the front with a soft, "Good morning." They looked up, nodded stiffly, then turned back to their conversation. I noticed right away how warm they were to the other customers, smiling, offering coffee, complimenting their outfits. But me? Nothing. I told myself maybe they were just busy, maybe I was being sensitive. But deep down, I knew the difference. I'd been here before, not just the store, but this exact moment. When people look at you, measure your worth in a single glance, and decide you don't belong. Still, I walked forward, my eyes drawn to a delicate gold bracelet in the front display. It reminded me of one my grandmother used to wear, simple, strong, and understated. I reached out to gently lift it when suddenly I heard sharp heels click on the floor behind me. "Excuse me?" a voice snapped. "Those are very expensive. We don't just let anyone handle them." I turned. A tall woman with sharp red lipstick and tighter than necessary curls was standing behind me, her name tag shining. Rachel, store manager. I blinked. I was just, "You'll need to wait until we can verify payment. We've had issues before," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Please don't touch unless you're buying." For a second, I thought I had misheard, but no, the silence in the room confirmed everything. A couple to my left exchanged looks. Someone near the register cleared their throat. One customer chuckled awkwardly, and a child whispered, "Mom, why is she in trouble?" I felt my throat tighten. Every eye turned to me, not in empathy but curiosity, like I was a problem that had disrupted their polished shopping experience. My fingers gently placed the bracelet back on its velvet bed. My hands didn't shake. I didn't let them. I stepped back slowly, still facing Rachel, who looked smug and satisfied like she had done her job protecting her store from trouble. I could have said a lot. I could have told her who I was, what authority I held, what mistake she just made. But I didn't. I looked her dead in the eyes and smiled. Not because I was okay, I wasn't. The humiliation sat in my chest like a stone. But I smiled because I knew something she didn't. It took everything in me not to cry or curse or let her win that moment. Instead, I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes. That's all I needed. Because 5 minutes later, the entire atmosphere in that store would shift, not with shouting, not with revenge, just with truth. And when that truth arrived, they would never forget the day they underestimated me. I wasn't born with power. I wasn't handed a store, a title, or even a single pearl. I was born in a neighborhood where corner stores had more bars than the windows, and where dreams often got eaten by rent notices and street noise. But even then, even when we had to boil water for baths or stretch soup for 3 nights, my grandmother wore her earrings like a crown. Her name was Loretta, and to me, she was royalty. She used to sit on our front porch and polish her tiny box of old jewelry, telling me stories behind each piece like they were relics from a lost kingdom. She'd say things like, "Gold doesn't make you valuable, it reveals your value." She believed in symbolism, in heritage, in honoring where you come from with every gem and chain. And she always dreamed of one day owning a small store, one that sold pieces not just for beauty, but for memory. She passed when I was 20, just before I got my first scholarship check. I held her necklace through every night shift I worked, cleaning offices, restocking vending machines, tutoring spoiled kids in math. I put myself through college with 4 hours of sleep and 1,000 cups of coffee. And when I graduated, I didn't buy a car or take a vacation. I bought my first lot of custom bangles from a wholesaler in Atlanta and started selling them online from my studio apartment floor. It was slow. Some months I barely broke even, but slowly, word spread. Women started telling me that my jewelry made them feel something. One woman wore a ring I designed to her chemo treatment. Another proposed to her wife wearing my bracelet. Those messages kept me going. 3 years later, I secured a modest round of funding from a quiet investor, an older woman who said, "I see your grandmother in your hands." With that seed money, I acquired 3 small boutiques that were about to go under. I kept the names, redesigned the interiors, and most importantly, I kept things quiet. I didn't plaster my face everywhere. I didn't walk in and demand attention. I believed in letting the work speak first, not the ego. Let the brand shine, I used to say. That's why I could walk into my own store and be mistaken for a stranger, something that used to amuse me. Until that morning, Rachel had come with one of the stores I acquired. I didn't fire her immediately because I believe in second chances. She was competent on paper, punctual, and her numbers were solid. But complaints trickled in, vague whispers about her attitude toward certain clients, tone issues, profiling. I sat her down once and reminded her, gently but clearly, everyone who walks through those doors deserves dignity, whether they come in wearing diamonds or denim. She nodded, she smiled, but nothing really changed. I started visiting my stores unannounced. No press, no suits, no assistant, just me blending in with the crowd. I wanted to see how people were really treated, not when they were trying to impress an owner, but when they assumed no one was watching. That day, Rachel assumed, and I felt it, not just as an owner, but as a black woman who had grown up being followed in aisles, asked if I could afford that, told I didn't look like the clientele. It was a tired story, but this time I was no longer the girl gripping her purse tighter in defense. I was the woman holding the keys. It wasn't the first time I had been profiled, but I decided it would be the last time I let it pass unaccounted because silence can be mistaken for weakness. But mine was full of strategy, full of history, full of her. As I stood there in the store, humiliated and watched by strangers, I remembered my grandmother's words. Jewelry doesn't make you valuable. It reminds you that you already are. And as my hand slipped into my bag to pull out the folder with the deed, the licenses, the payroll list, I thought to myself, power doesn't always need volume. Sometimes it just needs timing. The air in the store had gone still, like everyone was holding their breath. Rachel had turned her back on me after the confrontation, smug in her false victory, chatting with another employee as if nothing had happened. But I walked away, not out of defeat, but to give her one last chance to feel comfortable in her illusion. I stepped into the corner near the employee notice board and quietly pulled out my phone. My fingers moved calmly, swiftly. One tap, then another. I dialed a direct line. Hi, this is Vanessa Monroe. Please connect me to legal and on-site HR. Store 117. There was a pause on the other end, followed by, right away, Ms. Monroe. Patching them in now. As the line clicked over, I took a deep breath. Not from nerves, I was far beyond that, but from the weight of what this moment represented. It wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration. My dignity had been challenged in front of strangers, and now it was time to remind the room exactly who I was. Rachel must have sensed something shift. She looked up from the register, where she was now ringing up a wealthy-looking customer. I walked slowly toward her and gently placed my phone face down on the counter. You may want to pause the register, I said, voice soft but certain. Rachel blinked. Excuse me? I met her eyes. Pause the register. This transaction is no longer valid under current management. Confusion bloomed on her face. Then suspicion. Then a flash of something darker. Without raising my voice, I reached into my purse and pulled out a dark leather folder. I placed it carefully on the glass countertop, beside the high-end watches. With one fluid motion, I opened it to reveal the documents I had brought, the original deed of ownership, my purchase agreement, and a signed copy of Rachel's employment file with the boutique chain. This is your store manager, correct? I asked, turning the file toward the nearest employee, who nodded hesitantly. I raised my voice just enough to be heard by everyone in the store, not loud, but unmistakably clear. My name is Vanessa Monroe. I'm the sole owner of this store and 7 others just like it across this state. And today, in front of you all, I was profiled, publicly humiliated, and spoken to as though I were less than. A gasp rippled through the room. One customer murmured, "No way," while another pulled out their phone not to record, but maybe to Google me. It wouldn't take long. My face wasn't on billboards, but my name wasn't exactly hidden. Rachel stood frozen. Her face went from flushed red to ghostly pale in seconds. I, I didn't know. I looked at her, steady and calm. But you assumed. You assumed because of what I wore. because I walked in alone, because I didn't demand your attention. She opened her mouth again, but no words came out. I reached for the phone. Security, please escort Ms. Rachel off the floor. Legal is on the line and will coordinate her formal exit. I'd like her badge and register key returned immediately. An awkward silence settled over the store. Then the youngest associate, a girl no older than 20, stepped toward me, her hands trembling. Ma'am, may I get you something to drink? Water? Coffee? I turned to her with a smile that was both gentle and final. No, thank you. I've already taken back what was mine. Rachel tried one more time, walking toward me as if she could salvage her role with an apology. Ms. Monroe, I didn't mean... I raised one hand slightly, not to silence her, but to protect the peace I had just restored. You meant something, and that something is the reason you're leaving today. The customers had gone silent again, but now their eyes were wide with awe, not judgment. The same people who had watched me be treated like a threat were now watching me reclaim every inch of the space. One older woman near the display case whispered to her friend, "She didn't raise her voice once. Now that's power." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because some moments don't need noise. They just need truth. And the truth was, I didn't come here to be seen. I came here to remind them who owned the room. Rachel's termination paperwork was processed before I even stepped out of the store that day. HR handled it swiftly. Legal made sure everything was clean. The incident triggered an internal review across all our locations, not just to investigate her, but to reflect on something deeper, the culture we were allowing to grow in our spaces. I made it clear, I wasn't just cutting off one bad branch. I was planting new roots. As I exited the store, the cold air met my face, but I didn't feel the chill. I felt clear, lighter maybe. A woman stepped aside as I passed the doors, one of the customers who had witnessed everything. She looked to be in her 60s, her eyes kind and a little teary. "You handled that like a queen," she said. I smiled gently, nodded, and kept walking. I didn't need a crowd. I didn't need applause. I had done what I came to do, restore what had been stripped from me, not just my dignity, but my grandmother's dream. 1 week later, I returned, not quietly this time, but proudly. The same store, but a new energy. I wore a flowing white suit, crisp, elegant, effortless. My hair was wrapped in a silk scarf the color of midnight. I walked in through the front doors, not to inspect, not to test, but to host. The gold-trimmed signage at the entrance read, "Elegance for All, a celebration of self-worth through design." Inside, everything looked different. The staff, for one, it was now a team that reflected our community, not just the zip code. Diverse, thoughtful, kind, people with a passion for beauty and respect. We had invited girls from local underserved schools, bright-eyed, full of wonder, some wearing borrowed shoes, others wearing hope-like armor. They walked through the boutique as I led them from display to display, sharing stories not about price tags but purpose, about what a necklace meant to someone, about how the smallest piece of jewelry could carry the weight of memory, strength, or survival. We showed them how rings were molded, how gems were set, how brands were built. Not once did I talk about money. I talked about meaning. One girl, maybe 9 years old, tugged at my sleeve. She had short braids and eyes too grown for her age. She asked, "Did it hurt when she said those things to you?" I crouched down to meet her gaze. I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said softly. "It did." She waited. But I've learned that power doesn't come from what they say. It comes from what you believe. It comes from knowing who you are and never letting someone else's blindness dim your shine. She nodded slowly, like she was folding that sentence into her memory. Later that afternoon, the girls left with handmade bracelets, not as gifts, but as tokens, symbols of possibility. They didn't just visit a jewelry store that day. They saw a mirror. They saw that someone like them could own the building, shape the story, define the terms. As the day closed, I walked to the back of the store where a small, framed photo of my grandmother now hung, right above the workbench where we handcrafted our custom pieces. She looked proud. regal, eternal. I took a seat beneath her photo, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the boutique wash over me. Customers chatting, soft jazz playing, children laughing somewhere in the front. It was everything I had ever wanted her dream to become. Then came the final word, the final orders, not spoken aloud but felt deep in the marrow of my spirit. They judged me for what I wore, for what I looked like, and for what I didn't say. But the truth? I didn't need to shout to change the room. I just had to show the deed.